Some of yous are probably thinking, Brace, I've been sitting here for going on a minute now. Why am I looking at a car go up a road that's as dry as a popcorn fart? Where's the bloody farm stay? Well, I might have lured you here under false pretenses. Sorry, there isn't one. But with your help, I'm hoping to change that, and I'm going to bring you along for the ride. But before we get into the nuts and bolts of that, I'd better string you along a bit, just so you're getting a bit of value for your time. If you remember all the way back before we were dealing with the Sydney sneeze, Aussies were facing a bit of a dry spell. I reckon we start there. It was around early 2017 when we started to realise the local rain pourers had a gut full of being overworked and underpaid. So they packed up their rain buckets and went on strike for nearly 3 years. 2019 was the culmination of the strike, resulting in widespread drought, affecting water supply in our dams, creeks and water tanks, as well as a serious lack of feed for livestock. We had to sell as much stock as we could, often at huge losses, only to spend that on buying in hay and cottonseed from other states and hand feed what was left to maintain the breeding bloodline we've kept for generations. An endeavour that cost a small fortune, one that often leaves a lot of farmers in financial ruin. We hand-fed cattle, sheep and horses, along with chooks, dogs and cats. Everything with a mouth, getting starvation rations. It took us 2 days to get every mouth fed once, and then we'd start over, until the days turned into weeks, then the weeks turned into months, and the months turned into a year. Then came the bushfires. It started sometime in late August. Nearby bushfires flirted for a while, teasing with huge plumes of smoke in the distance. Then, as soon as the flames were within eyeshot, the wind would change and it'd take off again. Dad had fought a handful of bushfires in the area when I was younger. He joked the fire knew his undefeated record and took off scared every time he was close enough to sort it. I reckon it must have hurt his gloating, because it started its run up the gorge toward our boundary one arvo while he was at another property, almost an hour away, with no phone reception. Despite everyone doing their best with repurposed weed spraying gear and the local RFS when it got too much, we quickly discovered, with water being a commodity that's as rare as rocking horse shit, There's not a whole lot to be done to deter a bushfire during a drought. You just have to hope for rain, or at the very least, a change in wind direction. With the hope of stopping the main front from overwhelming the property, the best thing to do was to make fire breaks with dozers and graders, as well as to do small, controlled hazard reduction burns when the wind was right, all the while playing whack-a-mole with the spot fires that kept jumping the fire breaks. But eventually, with a bit of grit, determination and a hint of precipitation, we got the bludger rolled, chased off and headed back into the parks where it started. Yep, that's right you lot. After months of it being as dry as chalk on toast, we started to get some rain. We still had to feed stock and pay for water deliveries, but there was light at the end of the tunnel. Over the coming weeks, we could see some green shoot coming up through the dirt while feeding. The showers of rain started building and getting heavier and more regular. The rain pourers had gotten their pay rise and were back on the tools. We were ecstatic. They must have brokered a wicked deal, because they quickly became a little too enthusiastic about their job. But more on that later. The vegetation from the bushfires slowly began to heal. It'll be years before it makes a full recovery, but the rain will at least give it a decent start. We eventually exchanged feeding cattle for bushfire cleanup and repairing burnt fences by the kilometre. It was more hard yakka, but at least there was green grass and a great view. I've been building homes for over 10 years and done more than my fair share of rough jobs in that time. A lot of them a little bit too dicey to be making public knowledge. But I tell you what, being a bricky's labour is the only thing I can think of that was as hard as putting in this fence. Fencing usually isn't too bad when you can get machinery to it, but not here. This one was its own beast. Hand digging post holes full of rocks with shonky footing where one wrong step and you'd be taking the fast way to the bottom of the gorge. Remember a minute ago when I was banging on about how the rain pourers, fresh off their strike, were getting back into their work? Well, they must have been feeling pretty energetic and keen to deplete their overstocked rain supply, because pour they did, every chance they got, and my God, we were loving it.
Oh shit!
It rained so much, the ute started getting bogged while work was supposed to be getting done.
The unstoppable land cruiser stopped in its tracks.
But not just work utes, we bogged bikes too. But it didn't worry us too much, we just started using tractors. Until they got bogged too. Then we were in a bit of trouble.
It's like quicksand, isn't it? Yeah.
Luckily, by the time the tractors started getting bogged, the grass had grown long enough to start feeding the stock, which meant we no longer had to. The burnt fences weren't completely rebuilt, but enough of them had been completed that the remaining stock from the droughts all had somewhere to live while everything dried out a bit. Now what does that mean for the farmers? You'd think it'd be a good time to have a bit of a break and wind down after an insanely busy and stressful couple of years. But no such luck. There was plenty of missed paperwork to be done, and all the stock still needed to be checked up on, which meant a lot of time spent getting about on the old Foot Falcon and the Subaru. Now that you've got a bit of an idea where we've come from, you'll hopefully understand where we're going. You've witnessed a small window of the adversity faced through drought, fires and floods, but farmers have to deal with a stack more than just that. It's very much a case of you can only play the cards you've been dealt. My brothers and I had a bit of a laugh about it over a few Robert Downey schooners a while back, and decided to try and rig the deck a bit, diversify the income of the farm so that the tough times aren't so tough, but we weren't sure how best to do it. That was until our Auntie Sharon came for a visit with some friends from Sydney. They suggested with our personalities, a YouTube channel might be a pretty decent venture. We were pretty sceptical at first, until we were informed of the revenue some of these top dogs were bringing in. We almost fell over. So here we are, giving it a crack. The first venture we're going to undertake is the renovation of our grandfather's childhood home. It's got no plumbing or electrical. Structurally, it's got more bends than the Hawkesbury River and more humps than Alistair Camel, but it's got good bones, which is probably why this timid little brush-tailed possum's been calling it home for the last little while. The home was completed in 1923, 100 years ago this year. If that's not an omen, I don't know what is. So if this sounds like a bandwagon you'd like to jump on, you'd better polish up on your Aussie lingo, because I've been taking it easy on you so far. Then, hit like and subscribe to follow along, share it with your mates, and leave a comment below. The more traction this video gets, the more videos we'll post of both this and day-to-day farm life. So until the next video, remember, once in your life you may need a doctor, a lawyer, a policeman and a preacher, but every day, 3 times a day, you need a farmer.